Well, good morning, everybody. As I always do, give you a quick little reminder of the hyperlinks that are in the email that you received. I'm Anthony Schmott from Tyndall Oliver, safety consultant to a couple of DOT districts. You guys received an email reminder from the Safety Academy that gives you your Outlook calendar links if you want to have these kind of automatically added to your Outlook. If you have any questions or feedback, my email address is here. Dennis's email is here as well. There is a link to the Tampa Bay traffic safety site on the webinar. When you click on that, it takes you to our Safety Academy webpage. Maximize it here. We've made a couple of changes, and we're kind of always working on modifying and improving the website. We now have just the upcoming webinars listed separately from the completed webinars, so that the first thing that you see is the webinars that are upcoming. As you scroll down, also we've grouped the recordings and condensed them by year. So these are expandable lists now, and they're all listed in here as they come along. There's some new changes to that that we're going to do as well. And there are resources down at the bottom. The NCHRP report that Larry's going to be talking about today is here, as well as in your GoToWebinar handout pod, and the PDH request forms are here as well as in the GoToWebinar handout pod. So this is the location where the presentation and the recording of this presentation will be posted after the webinar concludes. With that, I'll hand it over to Dennis so he can do the introduction.
Good morning. This is Dennis Falloon, District 7 Safety Academy Coordinator Consultant, and I welcome you to the 9th District 7 Safety Academy webinar for 2017. Today's safety webinar topic is Reducing Head-On Crashes on Freeways by Larry Hagan. He's a professional engineer. He's a District 7 consultant with Hagan Consultant Services. And he's currently a consultant not only with District 7, but he works with District FDOT Districts 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. He holds a bachelor's and master's degrees in civil engineering from the University of Florida. He's definitely a registered professional engineer in Florida and Georgia. And he is a certified professional traffic operations engineer. He's got over 30 years of experience. He's also the PDH coordinator for the local agency Traffic Safety Academy, and he's also a provider for PDHs for PEs in Florida. With that, I'm going to give you our introduction to the Academy. As I mentioned before, this is a District 7 local agency Traffic Safety Academy. It's been established and going on for the last 5 years to provide information on safety-related issues to enhance your local safety program. And it started in January, will end in December 13th. The webinars run between 10 and 12 in that time frame, but a minimum of 1 hour. And the length of it will depend on the complexity of the topic. And as Anthony showed you previously, there's a link to register and also to go to the Safety Academy website. This is the listing of all the topics that we completed up through August 2nd, and then the ones that are looking forward to through December 13th. As I mentioned today, reducing head-on crashes on freeways. This webinar is submitted for AICP credit, and I'd like to make a note that for anyone looking for the latest one, which was in for August 2nd, there's been a kind of a system issue with AICP, and the August 2nd one was submitted on Monday, but it hasn't been posted yet because they've got some system errors. As soon as they clear that, we'll get it posted. As I mentioned earlier, you can submit your paperwork for PDHs if you're a professional engineer. And this kind of highlights the link to it, and that's what Anthony showed you previously. With that, I'll just close out and say that if you have any questions or need assistance, please contact me. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Larry.
All right, thank you. Ready to go here?
Anthony?
All right, let's see.
All right.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you all for being here today. We're going to talk today about reducing head-on crashes on freeways. And again, my name is Larry Hagan, and most of, or at least a little bit of what I'm going to be talking about today comes out of this NCHRP Report 500 Volume 20, which is a guide for reducing head-on crashes on freeways. And if you don't know me, there's my picture. You know, Rush Limbaugh talks from the golden EIB microphone. I'm coming to you live from the golden TSG microphone, Traffic Safety Guru microphone. So there's my golden TSG microphone. Isn't it cool? And so anyhow, that's my brand new thing. Hopefully the audio quality is good. I tried to get good audio quality out of it. Whenever I do one of the webinars, I issue my standard disclaimer. What it basically says is that you can't be an expert in anything just on the basis of a 1-hour webinar, but one of the things I hope to do in this is give you some resources, point you to some resources where you can really learn more about how to address head-on crashes on freeways. And it'll actually point you to some other resources for other types of crashes as well. So with that, let's jump on in and see where we go from here. All right, how big an issue are head-on crashes? So Anthony, can you do the first poll question, please?
Yes.
So I just want you to think, how big an issue are head-on crashes? Should this be the highest priority? Is it something that, well, is one of many serious priorities or many somewhat serious priorities? Or is it a fairly minor issue? These things don't happen that frequently. Or is it really just no big deal at all? What do you think?
Give folks a few more seconds. All right, let's close that poll and share the results. Are you able to see those results, Larry?
Let me see if I open up the poll thing.
No,
yeah, okay.
I'll tell you. 18% of the audience believes this should be the highest priority of FDOT. 56% of the audience believes this is a very serious priority. 24%, this is one of many somewhat serious priorities. No one voted that it is a minor, very infrequent issue, and 3% said that this is no big deal at all.
Okay, interesting. Well, I mean, that's interesting answers, and really there is no right answer. It is a very serious priority, but I know every agency, certainly Florida DOT, has a lot of other serious priorities, a lot of somewhat serious issues to deal with. Truly, head-on crashes on freeways is not a frequent thing at all, but whenever they do occur, they are very serious. A couple sessions back, Ken Sides, in the roundabout session, talked about kinetic energy. And so you can think about if you have two vehicles on a freeway headed in opposite directions that are going each 70 miles an hour, it's very similar to one vehicle going 140 miles an hour crashing into something. And you can imagine that would be very severe, very serious. And, again, head-on crashes on freeways are not common events. They don't happen too often, but when they do, it usually involves at least one, if not multiple fatalities. And so, yeah, it is an issue that is, again, probably not the highest priority because there's so many other crash types that we need to look at as well. But these are something serious that we do need to deal with because they are serious crashes. So again, really no right or wrong answer. It's all just where you are, I guess, on your particular perspective of this issue. All right. Here's a look at fatal head-on crashes. Just use a one-year period from April 1st of 2016 to April 1st, 2017 in Florida. Looking at Signal 4 analytics and pulling the data off Signal 4 analytics, there are, in this Signal 4 overview, 193 recorded fatal head-on crashes in that one-year period. It's interesting to note, if you can make out the number on the screen, 38 of those 193 fatal head-on crashes occurred in the Tampa Bay area. So obviously, we still have some work we need to do here, in the Tampa Bay area. It's important to note, though, that these are not all freeway crashes in this case, but include surface street head-on fatal crashes as well. And so if we zoom in to the Tampa Bay area, we can see that they're scattered all over the place in the Tampa Bay area. So those crashes, again, include surface street or regular local roads. There's a very, very few actually on the freeways. So we have a lot of head-on fatal crashes occurring even on fairly minor surface streets as well. As I mentioned, a lot of what I'm going to show today is in the NCHRP Report 500 Volume 20, which addresses the specific issue, head-on collisions on freeways. It's in the handout pod. You can download it there. And so, again, that's where a lot of this stuff's going to come from. But I'm going to add a lot of other stuff as well that I'm going to supplement it with some of the latest, greatest stuff related to this type of crash and what we can do to try to reduce them. Just talking from the NCHRP 500 report, it's part of AASHTO's Strategic Highway Safety Plan. When AASHTO came up with their Strategic Highway Safety Plan, one of the things they were trying to do is set the framework for all the states that were then going to be developing their own Strategic Highway Safety Plans. And so in the AASHTO Strategic Highway Safety Plan, they identified 22 goals to pursue in order to reduce fatalities on highways. And so there's a few of the goals in AASHTO's Strategic Highway Safety Plan that are relative to what we're going to be looking at today. Goal 15 is to keep vehicles on the roadway. If you keep vehicles on the roadway, that's where they're supposed to operate. If they leave the roadway, that's not where they're supposed to operate, and so bad things typically happen when they leave the roadway. The next goal, Goal 16, minimize the consequences of leaving the road. So even if a vehicle does leave the road, we don't want it to be a fatal mistake. We want people to survive even leaving the road. And so Goal 16 of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan for AASHTO was to minimize the consequences of leaving the road. And Goal 18 is to reduce head-on and across-median crashes. And so these three goals are really aimed at what we're talking about today. And these three goals are related to our topic today. And they're addressed in four of the emphasis areas that AASHTO has identified. And the four emphasis areas that are really addressed here: runoff road crashes, head-on collisions on freeways, and crashes with trees and hazardous locations. These four emphasis areas really are all kind of tied into this, and each of these four emphasis areas are covered in one of those AASHTO NCHRP 500 reports. It's a 23-volume set, and of course, like I said, the one we're really looking at and concentrating on today is this one, the head-on collisions on freeways. And like I said, a lot of the information we'll talk about will come from that. And each of these emphasis areas, like I said, has a separate volume, and they overlap quite a bit, but each one is a fairly complete treatment of that particular area. So, for instance, the volume on runoff road crashes is volume number 6. Head-on collisions is volume number 4. What we're talking about today is volume 20, and crashes with trees and hazardous locations is volume number 3. Okay, so with all that said, you probably say, okay, where do I get these things? Where do I get all these different reports? And, well, again, the one for today is right there in your handout pod. You can download that today. But so that's a real, just one click away and you can download that. For the others, let me just show you what I think probably is the easiest way to get there. If you go to my website, and my website, trafficsafetyguru.com, if you go there, if you click on the little links button there, across the top, it'll take you to the links page. If you go down to the links page, you'll see, you may have to scroll down a little, you'll find NCHRP 500, and you just click on that thing. And this takes you to the TRB site, so you can download any and all of the reports, the whole series. You can access all the reports. And so, like if we go down and select the guide for reducing head-on crashes on freeways. We'll select that one. And it takes us to that page. And so you can view or download the PDF of that report in its entirety for free. So that's where you download any or all of the reports. If you are a TRB sponsor, like Florida DOT is a DOT sponsor. So if you're a DOT employee, you can click the sponsor order and they will send you a hard copy for free. If you'd rather not print the hard copy, you can buy the book. And if you've got lots of money and you want to send TRB money to help support TRB, you can buy each of the books hard copy and order it through this website here. So again, this is how you can get your hands on these NCHRP reports. Again, very good resources to use for all the different crash types that are identified in their strategic plan. All right, so let's get into how do head-on crashes occur on freeways. And there's basically two things that happen that result in head-on crashes on freeways. Head-on crash can occur when a vehicle crosses the median and crashes with a vehicle traveling in the opposite direction. Okay, so somebody crosses the median and crashes into somebody in the other lanes on the other side of the median, and that can result in a head-on crash. Or a head-on crash can also occur when a vehicle travels the wrong way in the opposing traffic lane. So if you get on headed the wrong direction, if you, for example, get on to an off-ramp and start heading the wrong way up the freeway, that can result in head-on crashes. So these are the two basic ways that head-on crashes occur on freeways. And we'll talk first about the median crossover crashes. And so median crossover crashes, again, a vehicle crosses over the median and runs into somebody in the other lanes on the other side of the median. Now, according to the NCHRP 500 report, Florida DOT was doing a study at the time and found that there was 62% of all cross-median crashes occurred within a half a mile, 82% occurred within 1 mile of interchange ramp termini. And so what do you think would cause that? Why do you think that crossover crashes where a vehicle crosses over the median would happen relatively close to an interchange ramp? Well, a lot of times what happened in many of those crashes is somebody was on the freeway and then somebody was coming in via the on-ramp. And if there was congestion or they didn't see one another, someone would react suddenly and slide out of the lane they were in because this incoming vehicle came in right on top of them, and could slide into the median, lose control, and end up in the lanes in the other direction. And those kind of things, just the interactions that happen at on-ramp facility, or vehicles trying to maneuver to get off the freeway. The same kind of thing. If there's a lot of congestion and people not seeing one another, people riding in their blind spots, that kind of stuff, then these kind of things can happen where people bump one another, and then it results in one vehicle going across the median and again into the oncoming traffic lanes. And so it is pretty amazing. 62% within a half mile, 82% occurred within 1 mile of interchange ramp termini. So I thought that was an interesting thing out of the report. Also, it's really interesting, many of the more serious fatal crashes tend to be in rural areas where traffic is a lot higher speed. But what we find for the head-on crashes, that 56% are in the urban areas and just 44% in the rural areas. And what happens oftentimes, I believe, in the rural areas, yes, someone may leave the road, and if there's nobody in the other direction, they might cross over the opposing lanes and end up on the other shoulder on the other side of the road, and just be fortunate that the traffic is volume in that rural area and not hit anyone. And so I think that's part of the reason is, again, higher exposure in the urban areas, a lot more traffic in the urban areas. So when somebody does cross over the roadway, there's somebody in the other direction in that other lane. And again, that could cause a lot of problems. Another interesting thing, fatal crossover crashes on interstates by gender. Check this out, 65% of those that are the fatals involved in the crossover crashes are male, 65% male, 34% female, and there's 1% that I guess don't know what gender they are or something. But anyhow, 65% male. It's amazing there's that big a discrepancy. One of the things that we often see in many of these head-on collisions on freeways is alcohol is involved. We're not going to talk a whole lot about that in the countermeasures we're going to look at or anything. There's a separate NCHRP 500 for dealing with alcohol-involved crashes. But I've reviewed a lot of fatal crashes in District 7, and I remember seeing some of these head-on crashes on the freeway where the guy was 0.25 blood alcohol level, also had traces of cannabis and traces of cocaine in his system, and so he had absolutely no business whatsoever driving 3 times over the limit as far as alcohol goes, plus other drugs affecting him as well. And guess what? He headed the wrong way up the freeway and killed a bunch of people. And that is unfortunately the thing you see often in these head-on crashes on freeways is a lot of alcohol involvement. Also interesting that 43% of these occurred in daylight. So, based on FAR's data, fatal crossover crashes, not all at night, not all, at 2 a.m. when the bars close and that kind of stuff, but 43% in the daylight is fairly significant. And so, again, that's just some of the background you can get out of the NCHRP 500. And again, I think some of the stuff's kind of surprising. I would have not ever imagined 43% fatal crossover crashes occurring during daylight hours. All right, so the big question and what we want to talk about is what do we do about these crossover crashes? What do we do to try to reduce these crossover crashes? And so what are some of the things that we can do about that? And with that, Anthony, could you get poll question 3?
Poll question 3 or 2?
Yeah, 3. I should have run 2 earlier.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the what do we do about crossover crashes? Select all that apply.
Yes, so what do we do about the crossover? So what are some of the things you think we could do to address crossover crashes? You may have seen some of these.
Folks, a few more seconds here. Getting a pretty broad spectrum of answers so far. Okay, let's share the results of this. Close and share. I'm not entirely sure what GoToWebinar does with these self-selected apply for the percentages because obviously it's higher than 100%. But the highest result was install a 2-phase guardrail on the median. That's 83% of the audience. The next highest is 73% with install cable median barrier. 65% widen the median. 63% install barrier wall in the median. And 3% of the audience insist that these are very infrequent, that we should do nothing about them.
Well, very good. And it's interesting, the install 2-phase guardrail in the median is 83%, and that is certainly the most popular. And all the others really, the majority of the audience said, yeah, those are good countermeasures. Yeah, the 3%, well, yeah, these crashes, like I said, are fairly infrequent, but again, they are very severe when they happen. And so we'll look at some of this, and if you drive around Florida, you'll see that Florida has done most of these things. I mean, and we'll look at some pictures and see some of the things that have happened in Florida as we go through this now. Okay, so the first thing, and the most popular one was install guardrail in the median of the highway, and so that is a fairly common countermeasure. it's something really Florida has done pretty much systemically statewide. And here's a picture. This is I-75 between Lake City and Gainesville. And, you know, it's fairly typical of a lot of the interstate in Florida. You now have two-phase guardrail, you know, on one edge of the one of the lanes. And so it is out there to try to prevent crossover crashes. And I believe they're doing a pretty good job. But one of the things you see if you drive around Florida a lot like I do, one of the things you see is you often see places where the guardrail has been hit, or you see crews out there maintaining the guardrail. I think this is one of the things when Florida first started their program of putting in two-phase guardrail throughout the state. I think they were a little surprised just how frequently these things do get hit. Again, crossover crashes don't show up as frequent occurrences, in the crash records. They are fairly rare events, but people leaving the roadway is probably a little more common. And so what's happening is people that might otherwise have drifted into the median, correct, and get back on the roadway, well, now they're hitting the guardrail. And so there's a lot of guardrail replacement. If you're a firm that has one of those asset management contracts, one of the things you spend a lot of time doing is replacing guardrail that's been hit. And so, like I said, you see it when you drive up and down the interstate. You see it quite frequently where a guardrail has been impacted and they're having to come out and replace those panels of guardrail to get it back where it needs to be. So again, it is a very common countermeasure is putting in the two-phase guardrail to keep vehicles from crossing over the median. Another thing you will see here, if you look closely in the picture, you can see there's rumble strips on both sides of the road, on the outside and on the inside. And again, that's a decent countermeasure as well for reducing crossover crashes, is, those vehicles that might be drifting off, because somebody's drifting off to sleep or something, and they would hit the rumble strips and it would wake them up and, get them to correct themselves and stay on the roadway. So again, that's another countermeasure in and of itself that can reduce the number of crossover crashes. All right, so we have this countermeasure. We're going to look at, let's go to the Crash Modification Factor Clearinghouse, cmfclearinghouse.org. And I said, well, let's see what kind of crash modification factor we can expect for installing median guardrails. So I just looked up median barrier. Okay, that's what I typed in. That's my search, median barrier. And there's 243 crash modification factors returned for median barrier. That's quite a lot to choose from. So we have to kind of pay attention, drill down, and let's drill down and see what makes some sense. And so as we scan down through Crash Modification Factor Clearinghouse, again, I searched for median barrier. There's a lot of different categories and subcategories under here. If we drill down a little bit, one of the countermeasures, install beam guardrails on median of divided highway. Well, that's what we're talking about. That sounds pretty close. So let's blow this up a little bit. We can see what it is we're talking about here. So again, from the Crash Modification Factor Clearinghouse, what can we expect in terms of performance for doing this, for putting in the guardrail in the median of the highway? So again, here's just blow up the table there from the Clearinghouse. And first crash modification factor, 0.22, which is a crash reduction factor of 0.78. And it's strictly for cross-median crashes of all severities. That's the first one at the top. And again, if the crash modification factor is 0.22, that means that, well, some still get through. Oftentimes, in real high-speed situations, some vehicles may hit the guardrail and go over the guardrail and, enter the oncoming traffic lane. So, some still will get through. If we look down at the second one listed here, 0.13, that's for installing it. But this is just dealing with fatal crashes. So that means 87% of the fatal crashes we can expect to reduce by installing guardrails on medians of divided highways here. And so, that's 87% crash reduction factor, 0.13 crash modification factor. It's really interesting when you look down at the next two below that, the third one and the fourth one. It shows a crash modification factor greater than 1, which means a crash increase. And so, like for instance, a 1.4 crash modification factor for property damage only crashes. And what this is, okay, now instead of crossing over the highway, I've hit the guardrail and I may be redirected back into traffic, or I've now hit this guardrail and it's damaged my car. So I can expect, now I'm probably going to have a little bit more property damage only type crashes because I've now put this guardrail right next to the roadway. Same thing, the last one listed there, 1.18 is crash modification factor for serious injury or minor injury crashes. So an increase in injury crashes I can expect, again, because I've now I'm now, instead of allowing the vehicle to slide into the median and maybe recover on their own or maybe come to a stop in the median, by having the guardrail there, it redirects them. It is a redirective type thing. The guardrail redirects them back into the roadway, and so they may hit another vehicle or something like that. And so I can expect that I may see an increase in the minor injury type crashes. All right, so Anthony, let's fire up poll question number 4, if we could. All right, so poll question number 4, which of these crash modification factors should we use? And again, you can select more than one. So which of these should we use?
These results are interesting as they're coming in.
Mm-hmm.
That's a loaded question, Larry. Depends on what you're trying to do.
Exactly.
Give folks another second here. All right, let's share these results. Close and share. So 65% of the responses indicate that 0.22 should be used. That's the fatal reduction. The 45% is the next highest, says that the 0.13 reduction should be used. 39% says the increase of 1.4 should be used, and 23% of the audience believes the increase of 1.18 should be used. So mixed results going through, but more people believe that the highest reduction should be used.
Well, and I mean, again, it really goes back to what you said, Anthony. It's there really isn't a right answer because each of those are valid crash modification factors, and it really depends what you're trying to measure, what you're trying to estimate. The one at the top is 4-star rated. The others, the second one and third one are 3-star rated, and the bottom was a 2-star rating. Interesting, they all came from, it looks like the same report, but the one at the top has the highest star quality rating. So you would tend to think that's probably the one with the most statistical backing. The one you probably want to look at in favor would probably be the one at the top again with the 4-star ranking. We tend to really want to use the ones with the higher quality ranking. So the 0.22 crash modification factor for all cross-median type crashes. And so, that's, again, it's fairly decent crash modification factor, but it does indicate that some will continue to get through. So, again, something you still need to be thinking about and worried about. All right. Well, we also mentioned on that picture I showed installation of shoulder rumble strips. And so installation of shoulder rumble strips is, again, another countermeasure you can use for trying to reduce this type of crash. All right, so here's the table for that countermeasure, and you can see the crash modification factors there, 0.673, 0.771, 0.642, 0.765, and 0.476. Okay, so 5 different crash modification factors. And okay, again, you have to decide which one do I use. And again, it's one of those things you have to really understand the crash modification factor clearinghouse. Are we wanting to look at all type crashes? What crash severities are we dealing with? Or we just want to look at fatal and serious injury type crashes? And so you have to, again, figure out what it is I'm trying to measure, what it is I'm trying to look at to determine which crash modification factor I really want to use. So you have to be very diligent, very careful when selecting the appropriate crash modification factor. Well, let's say you picked out one of them. All right, and so now what do? We have both of those countermeasures in place. We have the median guardrail, and we have shoulder rumble strips. So what do we do with that? And so what do we do with these 2 crash modification factors? So Anthony, go ahead and fire up poll question number 5. All right, and just choose one of these. You can't choose multiple, choose one. So what do you do with these? You got 2 crash modification factors, one of them for you've installed guardrail, the other one for you've put in the rumble strips on the inside. Give you just a few more seconds. Go ahead and pick one of those. What do you think the best answer is? What do you think you should do with? You've got 2 crash modification factors, one for the rumble strips, one for the guardrail in the median.
All right, most of the audience has answered. We'll go ahead and share those results. We have 29% of the audience saying average the 2, 26% saying that it depends, 18% of the audience saying to choose the lowest one, 15% of the audience says choose the highest one, and 12% of the audience says you can multiply them together since they are both independents.
Well, that's interesting. Actually, it's a really interesting thing to do if you go to the crash modification factor clearinghouse website. There's a paper you can download from there that tells you what to do when you have multiple CMFs and how you may use them. And it really varies from state to state. Different states apply them differently. Actually, in Florida, what it says Florida would typically do is actually the first one, multiply them together. And it is something, again, you do want to be cautious in doing that. I'm glad to see that 26% of the folks chose the it depends answer. Probably were people in the recent class on the innovative interchanges where that was Mark Doctor's answer to a lot of things is it depends. And it certainly does depend here. What are you trying to really accomplish? And what are you trying to measure? Choosing the lowest one, 18% of the folks said that. And that's also, not a bad thing to do. Choose the one that shows, again, if it has a good star quality, shows the greatest crash modification factor and not concern yourself with the other one. Choosing the highest one is certainly the most conservative approach. But like I said, typically if you read through the literature, what Florida typically does is allows you to multiply them together, the 2 crash modification factors, multiply them together and use the 2 of them multiplied together. If you have lots of different countermeasures you're trying, Florida, the guidelines in Florida typically is don't go more than 2 or maybe 3 at the most. So you choose the best ones and you can multiply those together if you like. So again, that's how we would use the multiple crash modification factors here. I think multiplying them together is a pretty good answer. Although, like I said, some of the other answers are also, well, you could choose the lowest one and average them could also work as well. All right, so let's look at another type of countermeasure that you might want to try. Install concrete guardrail in the median. So how about if we install, instead of the standard steel beam guardrail in the median, how about concrete guardrail in the median? And again, this is straight out of Crash Modification Factor Clearinghouse. You can see, you look at the third one here, crash modification factor of 0. That means 100% of the crashes are corrected through doing this. 100% of the cross median frontal and opposing direction side swipe and head-on crashes are 100% are eliminated through doing this type of thing. But again, this is all crash severities, but the area type is limited to, it says here, rural roadways, and so not your urban roadways. So we'd have to dig some more to come up with something for the urban roadways. It's really interesting just looking at this table. You see the thing at the top of the sheet, the 2.2 crash modification factor. That means 120% increase in crashes, single vehicle crashes, by installing this concrete guardrail in the median. And so again, you've now got vehicles striking something hard in the median that maybe, had you not built that, could have come to a rest in the median or something like that. And so again, you have to be really cautious when pulling these numbers out of here. And again, you don't just go in and haphazardly grab a crash modification factor. You really have to dig deep into what the crash modification factor really says. And so let me show you an even better example of why you need to be careful when you pull these things out of the crash modification factor clearinghouse. If I go with just install median barrier, that's one of the other countermeasures listed there. Install median barrier. There's a long list of things here, but you can see some of the things. They all look very similar here. I mean, if you look at the first one and the third one here, there's different crash modification factors. The descriptions sound the same. These are 5-star rated. They all come out of the same report, same reference report. And so again, which one do you choose? You really have to scroll down and figure out which one you need to use. And you'll have to dig into the report actually to really help you figure out what's the appropriate crash modification factor. And you can see these all, the first four shown here, all show an increase in crashes for installing the median barrier. And of course, what we're trying to do is reduce crashes, save lives. And so, what does this really mean? Well, like I said, this is just part of the listing for this install median barrier thing. You really have to scroll down to see them all. But like I said, look at the values here. Some, 3.77, 3.25, real high. Here's a continuation of that same table, and look at these values. 0.03, 97% crash reduction for cross median crashes in rural areas. And again, just look at all the variation here. For this one countermeasure, there's 65 different crash modification factors shown for this install median barrier countermeasure. All but 4 of those 65 crash modification factors reference the same report. And the values range from 0, crash modification factor of 0, or 100% crash reduction, up to 9.92. So, I mean, they are all over the place. And like I said, most of them come from that one same report. Looking just at this table doesn't really give you the information you need to choose, which crash modification factor do I need. So it, again, is just a caution when you're using the clearinghouse. You really have to dig in sometimes to the report and see which of these things are applicable. All of these, like I said, are 5-star. So they've got 5-star rating, which means it's really statistically good. But again, the values range from 0 to almost 10. And so, I mean, it's, again, one of the cautions in dealing with the clearinghouse. It's real easy to grab a number and go with it, but it may be the wrong number. So you want to be real cautious using the clearinghouse there. All right, and so yeah, here is this example. This is actually I-275 in the Lutz area coming into Tampa Bay. and it's got the median barrier wall. You can see the barrier wall has a lot of marks on it, been hit a few times. And again, with the rumble strips on both sides of the road. So you could apply, both of those crash modification factors once again, if you are trying to analyze what's my safety performance for making these improvements on that roadway. Another thing we could do, install a median bifurcation where we widen the median. So we separate the opposing lanes very well. And, here's an example of that. This is on the Florida Turnpike, in the Wildwood area. And so they got a wide separation between the opposing lanes and, put a lot of trees in there. Well, head-on crashes with trees also is often pretty fatal, so almost as deadly as head-on collisions. And so, let's just think about this type countermeasure. Again, looking at the crash modification factor clearinghouse, what do we come up with? And so, well, we could look at the countermeasure change horizontal alignment, which is kind of what we're doing there. And again, what we are seeing, none of these crash modification factors look too good. They're all increases in crashes. So, well, that's maybe something we don't want to do is widen it and have trees out there. You can look at the countermeasure, increase the median shoulder width. And so we get another table. This one's got 20 different crash modification factors, a lot of them from that same study that we had 65 crash modification factors for that other countermeasure. And again, they're all over the place. They range from very good to very bad in terms of crash modification factors. And again, it just highlights you need to be real careful using the crash modification factor clearinghouse. All right, we talked at great length about crossover crashes. And like I said, really, Florida, by putting in two-phase guardrail for just about all the interstates in Florida, has done a great deal of reduction of the crossover type crashes. But what Florida is really focused on now is the wrong way entry, where a vehicle somehow turns on to an off ramp and heads up the wrong way on the freeway. And so this was the second category you mentioned of how these type crashes occur. And so again, it's something Florida's now putting a lot of effort into, because since they started putting the two-phase guardrail in the medians, the crossover crashes have gone down close to zero. Some still hit the guardrail and bounce over, but they're getting more and more rare. Well, the wrong way entry type crashes, like I said, is something Florida is really focused on now. And actually, Florida DOT just recently, just a couple weeks ago, was the winner of the National or International ITE Transportation Safety Council Award for the Wrong Way Driving Mitigation Initiative, or what Florida is doing statewide to really reduce wrong way entry and reduce the wrong way driving. And Florida's got a very comprehensive approach they're doing, the central office, and working with some of the universities and all the various districts throughout the state, working together to really reduce wrong way entry type crashes. And I'm very fortunate to be a part of the team. Been doing some of the research. This was one night we were out looking at some of the countermeasures, again, to discourage wrong way entry. And so here's the team. We were out there. This is down in Sawgrass Expressway, down in Fort Lauderdale area. We were doing some testing there. And it's researchers from University of South Florida, Florida International University, FSU, and some students out there. And we're testing all these different countermeasures. Again, we went all over the state. Here's one of the countermeasures. This was in the Tampa area. This is on Bush Boulevard. That's my vehicle. I'm driving up the wrong way. And it's a wigwag flashing beacons on top of these wrong way lights. So if the vehicle is detected going up the ramp the wrong way, the lights start flashing on top of these wrong way lights. And again, it's intended to get the attention of the wrong way driver. Hey, wait a minute, you're going the wrong way. Turn around, go back, before they enter the freeway. So this is on the ramp. This is on Bush Boulevard. And the lights start flashing and let you know, hey, you're going the wrong way. So hopefully you can turn around. One of the other countermeasures we looked at, and this is out in the Panhandle in District 3, they've got these internally illuminated raised pavement markers, and this is actually a video. So let me see if I can start the video. You should see the video. You see the lights flashing there. They are solar powered. They charge during the day, and they flash all night long. It's not triggered by anything, but they're right in the roadway. And again, they just kind of flash like that, and it's designed to get the attention of the vehicle that, hey, something's amiss, because you're heading and you see these flashing red lights. If you're heading in the proper direction, you don't see anything at all. But if you're heading the wrong way, you see these lights that are flashing, dancing across the lane you're driving in. And again, it's supposed to give you a clue that, gosh, something's amiss. Maybe I need to stop or turn around. And so it's a very useful countermeasure. I've been talking with the manufacturer, the distributor here in Florida, and very inexpensive thing you can put in. Like I said, they're solar powered, so you don't need any wiring or anything like that. They just basically drill a hole, drop them in, epoxy them in, and you're good to go. Because again, they're solar powered, and it's right there where the driver, often who is impaired, if they're going to enter the freeway the wrong way, typically, like I said, there's a lot of drunk driving type things related to that. So it's right in their face, and again, hopefully we'll give them a clue that they're about to head the wrong way. So a fairly useful countermeasure, and again, one of the ones that we studied. All right, very good. One of the things Florida also recently did was revise the signing and pavement marking standards, where now, as you approach a diamond interchange in particular, rather than what used to be a left turn arrow in this lane, we now have an interstate shield, the cardinal direction, and a through arrow, so that we don't, by mistake, lead you to turn left where we don't want you to turn left. This is basically the left turn lane that's going to go down to the next intersection and turn left, not at this first green indication, but where you see those other green indications further down the road. That's where we want people to turn left at this diamond interchange. And so it used to be there would be left turn arrows in this lane, but now we have again, the interstate shield, the cardinal direction, and the through arrow to just encourage people, hey, you don't turn left here. This isn't where you turn left. You go up to the next intersection. That's where you make your left turn to get on the highway. That's proven to be a very helpful thing, good countermeasure there. This is another countermeasure, red RRFBs, which is rectangular rapid flashing beacons on the wrong way signs. And again, this is triggered by wrong way vehicle being detected, typically with radar. And so when the vehicle is detected going the wrong direction, these red RRFBs start flashing. It's just like the pedestrian RRFB is very bright with that flicker flash. And it just is designed to get the attention of the motorist. Hey, wait a minute, you're headed the wrong way. You're headed the wrong way. And so again, a very useful, good countermeasure there. This is the one that was down in the Sawgrass Expressway. It's LEDs around the wrong way signs. And, it's, again, just triggered by detection of a wrong way movement. There's just little red LEDs around the edge of the wrong way signs, and they start flashing. And again, it's just to get that wrong way motorist, try to get their attention and say, wait a minute, you are headed the wrong way. Turn around, go back. And so, again, a useful countermeasure, very inexpensive, and it is something, in the MUTCD that you can supplement signs with LEDs like this. And this is another countermeasure they're trying in District 3. It's a blank out sign. The sign is blank until the wrong way vehicle is detected, and then a illuminated wrong way sign pops up, and it's got flashing red lights above it and below it that basically do the same wigwag thing we were looking at with the beacon. So again, these are some of the countermeasures we're testing all over Florida, and a lot of really good stuff to try to discourage wrong way entry. All right, now let's get back to our NCHRP 500 report. Again, this is where a lot of this stuff is coming from. And what each of these NCHRP 500 reports do is come up with some objectives. What are the objectives we're going to do? What are the things we're going to try to do to to address this particular type of crash. So what are our objectives for addressing head-on crashes on freeways? And objective, the first one, number one, is keep vehicles from departing the travelway. Keep them in the road. So we don't want them to cross over and head into opposing traffic or anything like that. We want to keep the vehicles from departing the road. We want to minimize the likelihood of head-on crashes with oncoming vehicles. So even if someone does leave the road, try to minimize the likelihood they'll make it all the way across to the other direction. Even if someone does enter the median, we want to reduce the severity of these median barrier crashes that do occur. We want to enhance the enforcement and awareness of traffic regulations among the people. And we want to improve the coordination of agency safety initiatives. So these are the 5 objectives that are listed in the NCHRP Volume 20, NCHRP 500 Volume 20, for addressing head-on crashes on freeways. So these are the major objectives. These are the main things we want to do. And then under that, we will come up with some strategies for each of these objectives. All right, so here's our first objective. Now let's look at some of the strategies that we can do. These are some of the things we looked at. Install left shoulder rumble strips, and that was one of the things we looked at. And provide enhanced pavement markings and median delineation. And provide improved pavement surfaces. So just make sure that you have a good pavement surface where people can stay on the road when they want to stay on the road. And again, make sure they can see where their lanes are and have the rumble strips there if people do tend to drift out of their lane. All right, the second objective, and what kind of things can we do to minimize the likelihood of head-on crashes with oncoming vehicles? Providing wider medians was one of the things that was listed. Improve the median design so the vehicles can recover, so no really steep cross slopes or anything like that. It's going to pull people into the median and make them accelerate through the median. We don't want that kind of stuff. Install the median barriers. We looked at, again, those kind of things, installing the median barriers, and implement channelization, signing and striping improvements. Again, doing the things that we can do to minimize wrong way movements at interchanges, again, so we reduce the wrong way entries. Next objective, reduce the severity of median barrier crashes that do occur. So again, improving the design and application of barrier systems. So again, when somebody hits the barrier, make sure you have attenuation on the ends and make sure that the systems don't make it worse, don't make the crashes more severe than not having that device there. One of the other things mentioned was enhance the enforcement and awareness of the traffic regulations. And this is one of the things listed there is designate highway safety corridors. I'm going to come back to that and explain that in a little bit, but this is one of the things listed there. This is one of the strategies for that objective. The strategy towards the objective of enhancing enforcement and awareness of traffic regulations is to designate highway safety corridors. Like I said, I'll come back to that a little bit. But the other one was conduct public information and education campaigns. We can't really fix all these things with engineering. We have to do some education outreaches. There's more than one E in our safety toolbox. And so doing public information is a very important part of trying to keep people on the road and headed in the right direction. And finally, improve the coordination of agency safety initiatives. Basically what they're talking about here is enhancing crash data systems. The way we can coordinate all the different agencies related to safety is making sure we have good crash data. We can communicate one with another. What kind of crashes are we seeing? Where are we seeing them? What are the things that might trigger these type of events? And so just having good crash data is one of the primary things we need to do to improve the coordination of all the different agencies related to safety. Now for each of these strategies, one of the things that the NCHRP 500 does, it helps you identify for each of these strategies, what's a relative cost and relative time frame to implement them. So for instance, this table just shows the short-term type things, and then they're ranked in terms of their cost, whether it's a low cost, moderate to high, or high. And so these are all, like I said, short-term strategies. All, or the first three at least, are low cost and moderate cost to do the public information education campaigns. Moving on to a medium time frame, where it's not something real short term, but into a medium time frame. These strategies fit the medium time frame, and again, they're ranked low, moderate. First three of them are a moderate cost, and then moderate to high for the last two strategies shown here. And then we get to the long-term stuff, and again, the cost is then ranked, and certainly provide wider medians where you have to relocate your roadway, purchase right-of-way, and all that kind of stuff is certainly a high cost and going to take a long time to do that kind of stuff. Installing median barriers, costs a lot, and it takes some time to get all that put in place. And so, again, that's just relative cost and time information for the strategies. And again, this is typical for the NCHRP 500 reports. It gives you that kind of information, just relative cost and time frame. So as you're thinking about which strategies, do I want to look at, you can think about, this is going to take a while to do, or is this a short-term thing that I can do with a little bit of money? Now, our objectives and strategies, again, listed here, and you can see next to each of them, you'll see a T, a P, or an E. And the things that a P is, that means it's proven. There's been a lot of studies to back it up. You have good crash modification factors. It's tried and true, if you will, or even beyond tried and true, proven and true. The T means something is tried. That means agencies have tried these countermeasures, tried these strategies. The results are still coming in, and some of these NCHRP reports are over 10 years old, so now some of those results may be in, and they'd be reflected in the Crash Modification Factor Clearinghouse. And some of the stuff here, if it's designated as an E, it's experimental. Someone's experimenting with it, but we really don't have any good information on how effective it's going to be. And so again, all the countermeasures, the objectives are listed, and each of the strategies towards those objectives are listed in our effort here to reduce head-on crashes on the freeways. And then again, just what the NCHRP 500 does for each of these strategies. It just gives you a description of the things you might have to worry about if you're implementing that strategy. So who is the target? Who are we targeting by this strategy? In this case, we're talking about left shoulder rumble strips as the strategy we're trying. And it targets drivers who unintentionally cross into the shoulder from the travel lane. So people that are falling asleep, or they're just not paying attention, they're texting or whatever and not paying attention to driving. And so they tend to drift into the shoulder. The left shoulder rumble strips is targeting them. It's trying to address those type situations and wake people up to the fact you're drifting out of the lane, get back in the lane. And then there's a discussion, the expected effectiveness of that particular strategy. And then what are the keys to success? If you're going to try this strategy, what are the keys to success? What are some of the potential difficulties? What are the appropriate measures and data? What are some of the associated needs you have if you're going to implement this type of strategy? Are there any organizational issues, policy issues, issues that would affect how long it would take to implement it, and any information on the cost? So again, for each strategy, there's a table like this. This helps you determine, is this strategy something I want to try? So you can more intelligently choose the strategies that you want to apply to your particular situation. Are there any training needs, other personnel needs, any legislative needs? And so again, just really looking at each of the strategies that you might want to apply for a particular objective, what are the things I need to be aware of? What are the things I need to be thinking about? All right, I mentioned a few minutes ago, designate highway safety corridors as one of the strategies. And, it was something I had never really heard of. And so I had to dig into this. And what the guy that does explains this is something some states had tried. Several states had tried this thing they call a highway safety corridor. And it's really a multidisciplinary, focused approach utilizing 3 of the E's of traffic safety. And so, for instance, a designated highway safety corridor would have more frequent, enhanced, focused enforcement efforts. So it's more aggressive enforcement. You put in some low-cost engineering improvements, and you're doing public outreach and educational efforts to enhance the safety in the corridor. So it's the kind of thing you're really focusing all the agencies, coordinating, cooperating to address the crashes you're having on this roadway. So that's what a highway safety corridor is. You've got engineering, enforcement, and education all working together in a focused and coordinated effort to address the crash types you're experiencing. All right. And finally, when we're talking about head-on collisions on freeways, there's other emphasis area guides, other NCHRP 500 reports that certainly tie in and could be applicable. And so it references, here's some others that you might want to look at, head-on collisions, horizontal curves, aggressive driving, speed enforcement, runoff road collisions, rural EMS, unbelted occupants because they get ejected and that causes a lot more fatalities, unlicensed drivers, distracted or fatigued drivers, alcohol impaired drivers, and again, the safety data and the needs for better safety data. So those are some of the other guides that you could also tie into the topic of reducing head-on crashes on freeways. So there might be some information in there that could supplement what you pull out of volume 20 here. All right, with that, we're getting close to the end here. And so I'm going to ask a question here. I think that's a pretty good resemblance. And so, Anthony, go ahead and kick in question number 6. All right, you can go ahead.
Looks like 96% or 93% are saying yes, and 7% are saying no. We had a few type into the pod saying close enough.
Okay, close enough. All right. All right. Well, hopefully that's a little bit of a decent resemblance. But with that, let's go ahead and open up to any questions that maybe you have. If you have some questions, go ahead and type them in the chat pod.
While new questions are brought up, I'll go ahead and there's a few that came up that are in there already. As a presenter, you're also able to kind of bring that up as well if you'd like to see them while we're going along. But early on, there was a few goals that you mentioned. Like you listed in the presentation. I think goal 14, 15, and 16, and people were wondering what the other goals are. What happened to 1 through 14, and what's goal 17, and where did those come again?
Those are from the AASHTO Strategic Highway Safety Plan. And again, if you go to that website, it should, I believe it also gives you access to AASHTO Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which, again, each of the NCHRP 500 volumes are related to those goals. And so they started with the goals, then you get the objectives, and then for the objectives, you get the strategies. And so it's working backwards, and I don't have those in front of me and don't have that right in front of me, but that's where it comes from. It's, if you go to or if you just Google AASHTO Strategic Highway Safety Plan, AASHTO Strategic Highway Safety Plan lists those goals, and again, you start with the goals, Under the goals come the objectives. Under the objectives comes the strategies.
Okay. Yeah, and then again, just Googling is the best way of finding that, because I believe you answered the question as it was being typed, but right off of the Traffic Safety Guru webpage. You also have links to the guides as well, because there was a question in the chat about where do I get a copy of these. You brought this up as well while you were looking at the crash modification factors, but there was just a comment in the chat prior to you bringing up the modification factors about widening medians, that there are studies that indicate that increasing a median width from 40 feet to 80 feet cuts fatal crashes in half. So that was just a comment that was in the chat.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit more about the star ratings in the crash modification factor? There was a question about, you know, who determines how many stars.
Yeah, the Federal Highway Administration, I believe, is the one who gives it the star ratings. And if you go to the CMF clearinghouse, there's a real good description, a lot of detail about how they come up with those star ratings. And it's based on how good your study is, where you're showing a crash modification factor, how robust your study is, all the different variables. Did you count for all kinds of different variables and variations? And it's really based on how thorough you do documenting your study, how in-depth your study is, how statistically valid your conclusions are, and that kind of thing. And like I said, if you go to CMF Clearinghouse, there's a real good description in there about how they come up with the star ratings. But for many applications in Florida, we're told we really should be using 4- and 5-star CMFs whenever we can. And so you want to look for
particularly for DOT work, we should be using the higher star ratings.
Yeah.
I think for like if you're doing HSIP applications, FHWA work as well, for federal funds on your projects, for safety funds, they're looking at, I think, only 4s and 5s. They're not even accepting crash modifications that are less than that.
Right. But again, they really are based on how statistically robust and how thorough your research is, and have you accounted for all the things you really should be accounting for when you're doing this stuff. So I hope that answered it satisfactorily. There's like I said, a really good write-up at cmfclearinghouse.org that will tell you, what the star ratings are based on and that kind of stuff.
Okay. And I think what we're about to be challenged here on the math on kinematics. So someone is typed in the chat that the collisions are equivalent. From the point of view of one of the vehicles, it makes no difference whether it hits a rock wall when it's traveling 50 kilometers an hour, or if it hits an identical vehicle which is traveling at the same speed in the opposite direction. The amount of force is the same to the vehicle in both situations. So this came up during the comments in the webinar when we were talking about the guardrail and how the injuries go down when a vehicle strikes the guardrail as opposed to striking head-on another vehicle, because they're traveling effective at double the speed when it collides. So it sounds like someone is questioning whether or not that's true.
Well, I would certainly think, when you hit a vehicle that's headed in the other direction, your relative speed at impact to that vehicle is the sum of the speeds. But, hitting that vehicle versus hitting a rock wall, the rock wall's typically not going to move. That other vehicle, once you impact it, it may bounce back, and so it's going to absorb some of the crash. And so it's not strictly twice as bad kind of thing, but actually, when you start talking about the kinetic energy of that vehicle, it's mv squared, and so doubling the relative speed, if you will, gives you 4 times the kinetic energy. So again, a head-on collision, especially 2 vehicles going 70 miles an hour, is almost always going to be fatal. And so and crashing into a rock wall at 70 miles an hour is often going to be fatal. And so both are really bad. But I think, I guess the one good thing about crashing into a rock wall versus crashing into another vehicle is you at least reduce the number of people that are likely involved, because unless somebody's sitting on the wall, the wall is inert. Whereas that other vehicle has people in it. So 2 vehicles, involves a lot more people.
Yeah, I think it's a semantics. Because what they're saying as well is that the force applied on the vehicle, like they're using 50 kilometers an hour, the force applied on the vehicle to stop is the same whether or not, it doesn't matter what object you're hitting. You're going from 50 kilometers an hour to 0. So the force applied on that, is the force required to stop a 50 kilometer vehicle an hour, regardless of whether the object that you're striking is coming at you or if it's standing still. The actual force is the same. That was kind of their point. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is that the angle of the impact. Thanks, Rudy, for chiming in the chat to kind of bail us out a little bit in this answer as well. Is that the crash worthiness of the vehicles? It's better to strike a piece of guardrail at that angle that you're hitting it, as opposed to striking a flat face. So the way that the impacts are designed to be absorbed, the injuries are reduced tremendously because of the angle at which the collisions occur as well. So there's a lot of factors. It's not just kind of straight up looking at the force involved. There's also the angle of deflection.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's lots and lots of factors when you're dealing with the dynamics of colliding vehicles like that.
There's a question in the chat about what the cost is of putting in rumble strips. I was looking at the basis of estimates, or the pay item numbers during your webinar to try to find the answer, and it's around $1,000 per gross mile. So I mean, you need to just it's pay item number 546-72 in Florida. For FDOT, but I mean it'll depend on where you are and how it's being installed. But at least in Florida, for the pay item that I was able to find, installing an edge line, it's a little over $1,000 per gross mile. So that kind of just gives you an idea of what costs are involved in putting in rumble strips rather. And kind of a follow up to that, can you talk about the difference between continuous and intermittent rumble strips, Larry?
Yeah, my personal preference is continuous, but I'm not sure why they really do the intermittent. Maybe Rudy could answer that. I think you do it intermittently. There's a chance somebody could miss the rumble strip, but so again, I think the continuous is probably preferable. I don't know, certainly it saves money if you skip every once in a while and not have to grind every single increment. But again, there is a probability that somebody might miss the rumble strips if you have a space where you don't put them in.
But Rudy, are you at a place that you can be unmuted? Let me know in the chat, and I don't know if you want to chime in. There is a question also about, he says yes. Let me unmute Rudy. You should be unmuted now, Rudy. Are you there?
I am.
Hey, Rudy.
Hey, how you doing? Great job. Very, very interesting, and certainly a problem that has been plaguing us since the beginning of the interstate.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for the intermittent was originally set up for bicyclists. It's a bicyclist friendly, so if a bicyclist is running the shoulder, they can go onto the main road if there's debris or something, or if they want to switch, so they don't have to go over. So there's a place for them to go over, to switch over from one side of the rumble strip to the other, from the shoulder to the main road, or from the main road to the shoulder. That was the reason for the intermittent rumble strips. And Minnesota has been working on that for many, many years, and they have their own standard right now.
Well, that I could certainly see where that would be applicable on surface streets, regular highways, but certainly on your interstates, hopefully you're not going to have bicycles going back and forth into the lane and the shoulder. So,
well, that's true if east of the Mississippi. West of the Mississippi, and it's a state law rather than a federal requirement. Bicyclists are allowed on the interstate if permitted by the state. So when you go west of the Mississippi, because of the fewer through roads, like US 66 doesn't exist anymore, I-40 and I-44, and some of those over the mountains, that's the only way to get there. So basically, in those states, you can use a bicycle on the interstate, and they do. So that's where it started. And then in Minnesota, there was just a real movement by the bicycle community to challenge rumble strips, because they just felt that even on a two-lane rural road and Minnesota has very large shoulders on their typical trunk line roads. So there was a need to address this, and we had several meetings, including with the congressman, on how to best address the system. So they came up with a bicycle-friendly rumble strip that was discussed with both the engineers and the bicycle community, and that's how that was developed.
oh, wow, okay.
Rudy, for those of you that don't know you, if you can kind of let people know real quick who you are. And also, Larry, there was a question in the chat. I guess someone didn't catch it during the intro. What is your role with FDOT? So if you guys can introduce yourselves.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, my role with FDOT, I'm a safety consultant in District 7 and with many of the other districts as well.
And did we lose Rudy?
No, I'm here. Oh, you want me? Okay. My name is Rudy Ums. I was with the Federal Highway Administration for 40 years, starting in 1970. So have seen the highway safety program develop from that time on through the different types of barriers. I was the chief of the Safety Design Division and chief of the Safety Operations Division in Washington, D.C., handled the manual and uniform traffic control devices. Had a wonderful career with Federal Highway Administration. And then I was the chief highway safety engineer, and I was on the 1718 committee that developed the 500 series and the Astro Strategic Plan and all that stuff. So if you're around for 40 years, you get to do a lot of great things. So I hope you all have the same opportunities that I do. And now I work for Tyndale Oliver on a part-time basis. On a as needed basis, and work with the traffic guru every so often. Mm-hmm. He is taller than I am.
Yeah, the big one man firm, right? That's your.
He is. He's a big one man firm.
Very large one-man firm.
That's right.
Very large one man firm. That's the.
Any other questions?
We'll give people a few more minutes to see if there's any other questions that are coming in the chat pod. That someone was asking if you would suggest or have any ideas as far as towards the median, if you should use intermittent and maybe use continuous, like using the different types of rumble stripes at different locations depending on their traffic travel characteristics. If you have any ideas on that.
I mean, again, if we were talking freeways or interstates where, in Florida at least, you're not going to have bikes. I think the continuous is best because there's, you're eliminating the opportunity for somebody to miss the rumble stripe or rumble strip. And so having the rumble strip there is, you want it there to wake people up. And if you have a little place where you're missing the rumble strip, again, there is an opportunity for somebody to miss it. I saw somebody had commented there about the noise from rumble strips, and that is certainly a valid concern, because if you're a resident close to a roadway and you have people running over the rumble strips all the time, it does make a lot of noise. But if you're saving lives, if you're putting the rumble strips there where you have a crash problem with people leaving the roadway, it is a very good countermeasure to put in there. And I live close to a road that has rumble strips across on the approach to a stop sign, not in a rural area. And yeah, I can hear those cars hitting the rumble strips as they approach the stop sign, but you do get used to it over time, and it's just one of those things that fades into the background. It's background noise. But if we're saving lives, it's a good countermeasure.
Rudy, you want to say your anecdote about the agriculture around the farm?
Oh yeah, yeah. One of the things there's transfers, like Larry was talking about, right before a stop sign, which every time a car goes over, it goes brum brum. That's certainly an issue, and you have that with every car. With rumble strips that are on the shoulder, you have that only when the car has actually left the roadway. So you can figure that if you're getting complaints from a resident or a community that there's so many people hitting these rumble strips and making such a noise, then you need to look a little deeper. Why are the people running over this thing all the time? Nobody should be running on these rumble strips at all. But if they're doing it a lot, then there's another deep-seated issue. From an agricultural standpoint, when we were working in Minnesota, we had put down some rumble strips in a rural area, and there's a lot of dairy agriculture there, that the farmer complained to the DOT that his cows had stopped yielding milk. So his yield of milk had gone down since the rumble strips were put in. So the cows weren't contented anymore. So the state had to go in and, just to mitigate the situation, just pave over it to just get away. They just got away from it. They just did it. But so you have citizens, and then you have contented cows that can create situations. So you just have to look at it to see if it's working, and why the people are running off the road and hitting the rumble strips. Hopefully they never hit the rumble strips, but if they are and doing it a lot, then we need to go a little deeper. Okay.
Anthony, are there any other questions?
The other point that was brought up as well is that the DOT uses in the raised pavement markings, the RPMs, where they're white on one side and red on the other. So this is another kind of countermeasure that is used everywhere, because if you're on the wrong side of the road, you'll see red stripes or red reflectors, particularly at night as you're driving down. So there's lots of things that are kind of implemented that are out there. That's another thing that your municipality can do if they're not doing.
Right. Well, Larry, I really appreciate your presentation. It was great. Good hearing from you too, Rudy.
Very good.
Very good.
I want to remind all the attendees, if you came on late, that a delay has occurred posting the August 2nd AICP form for those that are planners, because the AICP site is having some issues, IT issues. We submitted it Monday, and we still haven't heard back that it's going to clear out. So as soon as we hear, we'll post it.
And a reminder as well, the webinar and the recording of this webinar will be posted to the Tampa Bay Traffic Safety site. there is a link in the invite that got you to watch this webinar right now that takes you to that location. So those will be posted later.
And just a reminder, send in your PDH forms. The PDH form is pretty simple to fill out. Just 4 pieces of information on it. The webinar title goes there. Florida PE number goes there. Your name goes there. And your email address goes there. And those 3 things in blue stay the same, or they hopefully stay the same most of the time. So if you just fill it out one time, save it to your computer, the next time you come to one of the sessions, all you need to change is the webinar title. And it's real simple and easy. And then you just send that to me, and you'll get your PDH certificate.
All right, great. There's no other questions in the chat pod that are coming in. I'll go ahead and end the recording. We'll stay on the line for a few minutes in case anybody has anything else. Thanks, everyone, for attending, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you all.
Anthony and Larry, I'm going to head out to